Sure, I'd like to come out to meet up with you and to spend a few days at the zoo, I told my business partners in a phone conversation. So a couple weeks after that phone conversation, I was on a plane flying to Dallas and then on to Odessa, Texas, to meet up with my two business partners who had set up our traveling business, our traveling petting zoo, in a mall parking lot outside of Odessa. They picked me up at the airport, and I spent the rest of the day hearing their stories about their travels around the Southwest and the problems that they had had at the various sites that they had set up, and helping them with zoo operations, taking admissions, moving bales of hay, selling ice cream cones filled with animal feed, and of course, cleaning up the you-know-what that was a constant job. You can only put so much straw down until you have to clean it up. That night after we closed the zoo, had fed the animals, and made dinner over our propane cook stove, they broke the news to me. They were desperate after a couple of months to get away from the responsibilities of running the petting zoo, even for a short time. And since I was not completely unfamiliar with zoo operations, they were going away the next morning for 24 hours, and I was going to be in charge. Now, I had taken care of the pygmy goats, the chickens, the Sicilian donkey, Bill the camel. Yes, it was named after me because of personality. The calves, and Gertrude the ostrich. I'd taken care of them when we were in our winter site at a barn close to my house. I had even occasionally helped out with the zoo attraction when my partners had brought the zoo to a gig close to my house. But for the most part, I was the back office person, handling the taxes, handling the permits, handling the money, paying the bills. I never had actually run the zoo by myself. So the next morning, my partners gave me a few final instructions, then got into their pickup truck. And as they were getting ready to drive off, they turned to me and said, "We have faith in you. We trust you." And then they left. And I was there with a dozen or a dozen and a half animals, 2 staff persons, and a lot to do to get the zoo open for the crowds, especially the after-school crowds that would come through. That proverbial trial by fire. And I'm happy to report that everything was fine, but I was exhausted. They had trusted me with our investment in this tent, the fencing, the semi-truck, dozens of living creatures that were in our care, and the staff of 2. I had been very nervous, but also honored to have been trusted with what was actually their livelihood. Having faith in and having trust of someone or something is essential to living in any reasonable way in our society. As clinical psychologist and family enterprise consultant Dr. Dennis Jaffe noted in one of his books, there are just a few elemental forces that hold our world together. The one that is the glue of society is called trust. So what is this thing called trust, and how does it relate to faith? As we heard, and we often use the terms faith and trust are often used interchangeably. But again, as we heard in our reading this morning, while faith and trust may be in the same room, they are in different chairs. Faith is having a deep-seated confidence in someone or something, or a conviction that something will happen or not happen, even if there's no direct evidence for that idea. Trust. Trust is to believe in the reliability, the truth, the ability, or the strength of something or someone, and then live out that belief in how we function in our day-to-day life. Trust is the emotional foundation of faith. There's a story about a 19th century high wire acrobat by the name of Charles Blondin and his friend and manager Harry Colcord that can be used to illustrate how faith and trust are related but different. In 1859, Blondin became the first person to cross Niagara Falls on a tightrope, 1,300 feet on a hemp rope. Thousands of people had gathered for this spectacle. And then over the next few weeks, Blondin did a series of encore performances, each more daring than the last. And again, thousands came to see him. He walked backwards. He walked blindfolded. He did back flips. He pushed a wheelbarrow, and at one time even stopped to cook an omelet midway across the falls. People were in awe of him, and they kept telling him what a courageous and talented man he was with incredible balancing skills. One time, just before he was getting ready to step onto the rope, he asked the people who had gathered there if they believed he could walk across the falls on the tightrope. And they yelled, "Yes," and a lot of other sounds. And then he asked them if anyone wanted to have him carry them across the falls. Silence. And maybe a few chuckles like that. Yeah, right, about that. Then Harry Colcord climbed onto Blondin's shoulders, and the two of them moved across the chasm, moving as one body to the other side. So this is the difference between faith and trust. The spectators had faith in Blondin and believed in his abilities. The Colcord trusted him, then merged his trust into his faith. In the context of religion, a person's faith is a constellation of beliefs about life, the universe, the divine, the afterlife. These beliefs are held with great confidence. But what's interesting, to have faith, a person needs to first trust in something that is greater than them. A person's trust in that something of value or consequence underpins and roots and holds their faith. That something provides the spiritual or philosophical foundation on which to build their life, to build a faith. Trusting the validity and reality of whatever one says is the genesis, or the Big Bang, if you will, of your faith, first gives faith form, and then second, it challenges the person to open themselves to something that is beyond them, beyond the self. In Jewish, Muslim, and Christian religious traditions, that's something that gives faith form and opens them to going beyond the self is God. Now, I assume those of you who grew up in one of those religions heard many times, put your trust in God. Put your trust in the Lord. I know I heard that, but I was never sure what that meant. I believe, as I look back, that I understood that advice, as many people do, to be saying to not worry, because if you have a strong enough faith, God will eventually give you what you want. So just hang in there and wait for God to answer. God will take care of things. And I guess that interpretation works for a faith system for some people. But the real meaning of that admonition is for people to go much deeper with their faith response. That is a call for people to give themselves over fully to God's will, to live with the conviction that whatever God decides for us is the right thing. It means being at peace with what God does or decides for our lives. It's accepting that God often acts in paradoxical ways, which is a polite way of putting it, paradoxical ways that may be different from or even contrary to our notion of what is right or what is best for us, but knowing that there is a greater divine plan for our life and all of existence. Spanish mystic Teresa of Avila summed it up this way when she wrote, "It is presumptuous in me to wish to choose my path because I cannot tell which path is best for me. I must leave it to the Lord who knows me to lead me by the path that is best." But I would guess, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I would guess that for most of us here, that philosophy doesn't resonate. I would guess that most of us here do not pray, "Thy will is my will." But that doesn't mean that our Unitarian Universalist faith cannot have or does not have something of consequence, some things of consequence in which to trust that give our faith meaning and focus and purpose. From my almost 30 years in the ministry, I've come to see that there are really several non-deity ideals that Unitarian Universalists trust that can give a person's faith meaning. Some Unitarian Universalists trust that there is a metaphysical energy that permeates life, that connects all of existence, making the universe and all of its components a single entity in some way. Pressed for a term to name that, I've heard you use the Star Wars concept, the Force. Others name it as the interdependent web, the collective unconsciousness, Chi, divine love. Some Unitarian Universalists assert that trust that drives their faith is the power of love, love with a capital L, which is that positive, or some may even say the divine energy that infuses people with a deep and abiding desire to alleviate pain and suffering in the world. Some people I know hold trust in justice, in the power of justice as the way to understand the world and live out a faith, and as the foundation for their faith. They trust, as did Theodore Parker, that while the arc of the moral universe is a long one can divine by conscience and experience that surely it bends towards justice. Other UUs say their Unitarian Universalist faith is founded upon trust in the power of the individual mind. The mind is that which one should exclusively believe to give faith. And some Unitarian Universalists have a religious faith anchored in the trust of the community, the power of community. For them, community gives life meaning, keeps them honest in the practice of their faith, prevents them from getting lost in wild religious notions, and gives them joy in being able to respond to the ancient call to bring about justice and equality for all. Faith based on something that is greater than just the self is essential for living. It is essential for living. Our personal faith, regardless of what it is, theist, atheist, religious humanist, neo-pagan, earth-centered, pantheist, Christian, Jewish, fundamentally give us an identity. First, a self-identity, and then identity to the larger world. It gives us an understanding of our place in the world, our place in existence. But to have a viable faith, one that really guides us, that can answer questions, a faith that can help us deal with the daily existential challenges, requires that we really know in our heart in what we trust as the genesis of our belief system. A faith needs trust. So I invite you today or some other time to consider and ask the question of yourself, and what do I ultimately trust that makes me the religious person I am, that gives me the faith that I have, that brings me to this remarkable, diverse, Unitarian Universalist community? So be it.